Let's get this show on the road. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Welcome to Web3 Warriors Episode 22, where we are going to be looking at some interesting feedback that we've received over the months that we've been running here. Episode 22 is going to be marking 6 months of Web3 Warriors podcast that we are really proud and excited about and looking forward to the next 6 months. But with it being episode 22, we're also going to wrap up season 1 of Web3 Warriors with this episode. I think it's fitting. We started on January 22. You know, we've had 20 amazing guests and 21 amazing episodes. And so I just want to thank all of our guests who have contributed so far. It's been a really amazing ride. And I think that every episode, you know, really has had some serious gold nuggets of amazing value for anyone trying to find out, you know, what Web3 is all about and what the space is really working on. So today, unlike all of our previous episodes, I'm really going to be taking a look at some of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or FUD as we call it, and kind of unpackaging it a little bit from my perspective. One Frog 9 may be joining us as well, so we'll be looking forward to that. But really just want to share with you kind of a little bit of pushback on some of the more critical feedback that I've been receiving as I continue to, you know, build in this Web3 space and try to convince others, especially gamers, of the value of Web3. Before we get into that, I do want to thank our sponsor, Iskra, the Web3 gaming platform. We know at Web3 Warriors that gamers are often not compensated for the value that we create as a community. But at Iskra, you know, we have both developers and gamers able to actually make the most of their creations and also get compensated and rewarded for the value that they bring as they're experiencing next-gen Web3 games that are both enjoyable and sustainable. So you can sign up at pioneer.iskra.world to join their Discord and get into some Web3 gaming nice and early. So thank you, Iskra, for your support. It's been awesome. Really cool community in the Discord too. And congrats on the Pioneer NFTs that they've just launched. So a lot of really cool things coming out of Iskra, based in East Asia, which is really cool. International vibes of the Web3 space as well. So as I said, you know, I've been hearing basically a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, especially in this time, you know, as we are possibly, likely, definitely in a bear market. But really, even from the initial, you know, when crypto was still riding high, as a gamer, I've really been trying to convince people that, specifically gamers in the space and around Twitch, that there's a lot of value in Web3 for streamers. Putting aside even the idea of actual Web3 games that pay you or reward you for actually taking part in their ecosystem and joining their gaming community and really either building on one side or just playing the game and trying to, you know, build up your collection on the other side, and they reward you for that. But outside of that, there's also just the potential for streamers and content creators to actually make the most of NFTs and what they provide, and basically add a whole new layer of potential revenue and monetization and really rewards for your community and for the people who show up to your streams. So I have been trying to just kind of pitch that to some of the streamers communities that I join and drop in on. But a lot of pushback has been around the idea that essentially the entire ecosystem is just artificially inflated by a lot of venture capitalists and a lot of people that are just out for the money, right? And that's not necessarily wrong. So I really wanted to look at this whole criticism, this whole concept of, crypto and blockchain is just a big pump and dump scheme essentially for rich venture capitalists. So with that, the one article I've received like 2 or 3 times, maybe even more, since I started this podcast. Now I will preface it by saying it's a little bit political, but I think it's an interesting read that does raise some legitimate criticisms of the Web3 space. And this was in response to Elon Musk in a response to another tweet saying that he thinks Web3 seems like BS, which is kind of odd considering, his influence over the Doge community. And clearly he sees the value in cryptocurrency as a technology, I think. But in general, as far as Web3 as an entire ecosystem, it was interesting, kind of caused a wave of conversation. And one of the more popular articles that came through that I've been receiving a lot of, which, I disagree with some of the pieces, but a lot of it actually is relevant. So what I want to do is read this article and kind of go over it, probably paragraph by paragraph, kind of sharing, what my thoughts and feedback are. So the article is from Medium. It's by Magic Baron. Now I've had like 3 different people from different corners of the world send me this. I tried to do a little bit more research here. I'll show it briefly on the screen. I didn't want to just have dry words. So this is the article here. You can go to medium.com and look it up. Just Elon Musk is right. Web3 is BS. So as I said, it's a little bit political, but he also does raise a lot of very valid, interesting points that I think we should just acknowledge, and obviously I will preface this by saying also that this may trigger some of my Web3 friends out there, and this is not necessarily who I am reading this for. It's really about, being able to take on some of the more valid criticisms of Web3 and blockchain, and do so in just kind of an honest way, and look at the power of, what the impact is actually being made. Look at the creators who are in Web3 and generating revenue from it and benefiting not only themselves but their communities, right? And look at the technology and what it makes possible that wasn't previously possible. So that's where I'm going to be coming from. But I think on the financial side of things and on the economic side of things, there are some pretty legitimate criticisms within this article that I think is worth unpacking and worth at least acknowledging for people who are out there who think that, it's all rose-colored glasses and that we all just think Web3 is the great utopia and it's going to bring about, entire radical world change. I don't think that anyone is that delusional. There is definitely some aspirational hopes that Web3 will usher in a kind of new mentality, a kind of new framing of the economy, essentially. The idea that scarcity can be done away with, essentially. The idea that, the old kind of justifications of greed and profit margins in the name of capitalism could actually be replaced with abundance theory instead of scarcity, and really the idea that the best corporations, the best companies, the best businesses are the ones that reward their clients, their customers, and their community if they take it that far. So that's really the Web3 ethos that we're trying to push, but nobody, at least the people I speak to, thinks that that's just a easy thing to get done. So I am hoping that we can also get any conversation going from the live chat. If anybody is joining us in the Twitch that wants to share their perspectives, maybe a differing opinion or anything like that, that's why we do the live streams on Twitch and YouTube now, to allow for anyone to ask any questions, share any thoughts, feedback on my perspectives or on the perspectives in the article that I'll be reading. I'm going to drop the link for the article in the chat right quick so anyone can follow along if they'd like to. And so without further ado, we'll just kind of break this down piece by piece. And then once we're done that, shouldn't be too long, I'm going to just kind of point to some of the amazing guests that we've had on Web3 Warriors over the last 6 months and kind of show just that the things that they're doing, the projects they're working on cannot be BS. And that's just the plain facts of it, is that, whatever criticism you might have of the space, whatever criticism you might have of cryptocurrency in general, which of course there's so much garbage out there when looking at cryptocurrency broadly. I look at Bitcoin, Ethereum, and maybe one or two others, Cardano, Tezos, Solana, a few that are like legitimately fully transparent, and at least you can see exactly what they're doing and their purpose, and not all of them are succeeding. There's a lot of criticism out there, maybe for good reason, but at the very least, there's a good number of cryptocurrencies, blockchain built cryptocurrencies that are fully transparent, and all you have to do is do your research and kind of understand what their purpose is. But if you're just following the words of people on Twitter and people that say you're going to get rich quick, that's where kind of the more scam and BS side of the argument comes in. All right, so I'm going to skip a little bit ahead of some of his Elon bashing and political content right at the beginning, but basically he says, I wholeheartedly agree with Elon despite having political differences with him. Web3 sounds like BS. Now, Web3 as an idea Bloomberg admitted is a bit hazy. So that suggests that we haven't achieved decentralized worldwide web using blockchain. The proponents of this concept like to talk about how Web 2.0 became centralized and controlled by big corporations, and how blockchains, crypto, and NFTs can help give the power back to the people. I'm not going to lie, I've definitely spoken to that ethos. And I don't disagree, actually, that it is potential. It is part of the technology's potential. Now, this sounds wonderful and looks good on paper, but in reality, he thinks it's BS. So why does he think Web3 is BS? On several different levels. Most importantly, it confuses a political and power relationship problem with a technological one. According to Web3 believers, blockchain is the technology that can finally allow the web to go back to its decentralized roots. The truth is, blockchains are not only useless in achieving that, we already have the technology to achieve that. I disagree there, definitely on the idea that it's useless in achieving that. And the idea that we've already have the technology to achieve that is, I think, kind of false, but the technology within, Web 2 is there. But ultimately, you're still relying on a centralized organization or company to essentially kind of manage that technology. Whereas through blockchain and through decentralized kind of ownership of the entire blockchain, you're actually guaranteeing that the things on the blockchain remain immutable. Again, especially in Bitcoin, and I would argue Ethereum's sense, they're sufficiently decentralized to the point that no even large group of people, and definitely no individual actors, can actually take down and break the blockchain and essentially remove or get rid of your data that you have then put onto the blockchain through NFTs. So it is immutable, and that technology did not really exist prior to the blockchain as we know it. So that's kind of a little bit misleading there. But I like that he said it's decentralized roots, because the internet did have decentralized roots. And as I've said on a previous episode, Web3, a good way to think of Web3 is as stages of decentralization. So Web 1, you could argue, really decentralized information. Up until the internet, we kind of just had to believe what government told us was history, what government or media told us was happening in the world, and what was a priority or what was most important in the world, right? So internet came along and kind of shook the core of that narrative. Now, of course, power structures still find a way to maintain control, as we've seen. But definitely the information became much more widespread, much more decentralized, right? And then Web 2 took that kind of information decentralization and actually built on it in the sense of media and the idea that pictures, video, all kinds of really more engaging content is also made much more decentralized now. So we don't have to go to CNN. We don't have to go to any one media outlet or even just the cable TV to look at those limited options, right? We got YouTube, we've got Twitch, we've got different platforms of creators, content creators, putting their media out there in a decentralized way that cannot, at least not as easily, be censored or stifled by kind of the government or power structures. But again, as this article just said, the critics say that it has become very centralized. And as we've seen with a lot of the quote unquote cancel culture and a lot of the narratives around, the current media landscape, even the social media landscape, YouTube, Facebook, and too much censorship happening in some people's opinions. So the argument is on blockchain, that kind of censorship cannot happen. If someone mints an NFT with very questionable content that should not, that's just offensive, technically nobody can take that off of the blockchain once it's on there. Now, OpenSea can screen it, OpenSea being the platform that allows you, basically an aggregator of NFTs on the blockchain, on the Ethereum blockchain, or Solana now they have. So they might block it from being seen because it's offensive, but it's still there on the blockchain and nobody can remove it from the blockchain, and it will always be there as a token. So again, the technology to do that, to really be that untouchable, to be that immutable, did not exist before. Continuing on, he mentions a couple networks that I've looked into that are definitely nowhere comparable to blockchain and Web3 kind of communities, whether you're looking at the DAO as a decentralized autonomous organization or just other, blockchain-based platforms that are trying to kind of do a new type of social media. ActivityPub and Mastodon are two examples that he kind of references. Like ActivityPub is a protocol that has been available for years and which inspired the creation of a fairly successful decentralized federated social network such as Mastodon. As I don't have to tell you, these so-called decentralized federated social networks are failures and nobody uses them, so it goes without saying. Any community can create their own ActivityPub instance, which is controlled by them. Even a single user can create their own server instance if they want to and federate it with other instances. It's a beautiful architecture that allows people to control who has access to their feeds and what sort of feeds they are exposed to. Not really at all blockchain, but similar in its attempts for decentralization. So why haven't we seen a mass exodus from Twitter and Facebook to Mastodon? The technology's there, the platform's there, but it takes a register and switch. All it takes is a register. All it takes is to register and switch. The reason for this is that platforms like Twitter have already achieved enormous power and influence and a large user base that simply stays where most of the people they follow are. There are plenty of stories of people switching over to Mastodon only to return to Twitter lately. So obviously it goes without saying, the more popular platform, especially when it comes to social media, are the ones that people want to be on. I would argue they become the most popular platform, not just by first to market, not just by lucky timing, by actually building a product that works. Building a product that innovates, building a product that actually tries to respond to its users. And I do, as much as Twitter can be criticized, think that Twitter is doing that much more effectively than some other social medias. And they, the pressure's on right now for social media to innovate. And I'm seeing Twitter do it, frankly, more than anyone else. And I'm pretty impressed. But to say that, everyone's just running after decentralization is kind of a misnomer, right? I don't think that's the goal of anybody. Now, the monopolistic nature of the biggest social media platforms is also beneficial to other companies, which can streamline their advertising and marketing campaigns. This benefits the wider capitalist system. The monopoly of the big players is a natural result of the system that we have in place. Sure. The Web3 thinking is based on the naive technocratic assumption that technology and smart ideas can solve most of our societal problems. Its naivete also expands to the belief that free market capitalism is the solution to the encroachment of monopolies and not the system that is in fact actively creating and enlarging these monopolies. Interesting criticism. There isn't a technology that will solve this. And this isn't happening because of a certain lack of technology. We already have tools to create a decentralized web, and blockchains aren't even the right technology to begin with. All right. So he's making a very huge claim there that we already have the tools to create a decentralized web without blockchain, and that blockchains shouldn't be the ones to kind of solve that problem. Now, I think if we had the tools to create the decentralized web, I haven't frankly seen them. I don't think that decentralized is truly decentralized unless you as an individual have ownership of the digital assets. And I don't think that anything but blockchain technology has actually allowed individual owners or individuals to have true ownership of assets within the digital world, right? Whether it's your wearable in the metaverse, or whether it's a whole lot of land in the metaverse, like these things didn't really exist as immutable purchases, right? If you purchased land inside, any one of the different VR spaces, for example, that would belong to, alt space, or it would belong to whatever, VR chat or whatever the case may be. You build within their ecosystems and they own it. Whereas if you build something for crypto voxels, for example, which is what you're seeing on the screen right now, a really cool example of a build that was actually dropped to me for free, if you can believe it. This amazing, beautiful art space metaverse where we're showing our Web3 Warriors collection was dropped to me on the blockchain. and it's immutable. So nobody can take it from me. It's not, existing in some little ecosystem that can be removed if that company goes out of, goes bankrupt or whatever the case may be. It will always be on the immutable blockchain for me to access. Now, even if Voxels, Crypto Voxels, the company that acknowledges and supports this JSON file, happens to go under, which I doubt will happen because they're doing very well for themselves. But even if they were to go under, this JSON file, the main root file of what we've created, would remain in my wallet and on the blockchain, and any other Crypto Voxels 2 or new voxel space that popped up would likely be able to sync up with it, and I'd be able to revive my whole space. So nothing will remove this digital asset from my wallet. So that's a very important point, is the immutability, and the tools to have that immutability, to have that digital ownership, just doesn't exist outside of blockchain. So he's wrong. Blockchains, NFTs, and crypto BS. A blockchain is a form of digital ledger, which consists of records called blocks. Such a database is managed autonomously using a peer-to-peer network, meaning there is no main centralized machine controlling the whole infrastructure. Instead, everything is controlled collectively by all the nodes connected on the network, as I was mentioning. Especially when looking at Bitcoin and Ethereum, these nodes are quite, decentralized. They're all over the world, and they are, not in the hands of any one group. But he goes on to make some pretty interesting criticisms. So let's carry on. The main purpose of a blockchain, and really the only reason it can be made useful, is to record transactions. Of course, it is admittedly a fairly clever way of avoiding the double spending problem when a digital token is spent twice or multiple times, that is, transferred to multiple destinations at once. This is also why, so far, the only major use of blockchains is for digital currency and artificially scarce digital assets. NFTs, non-fungible tokens, is what he's talking about. Very interesting. I'm not sure why he's framing that as a bad thing. That's pretty monumentous, right? Blockchains being used for both digital currency and artificially scarce digital assets. And to say artificially scarce is, you can just say it's, anyways, it's a very interesting way to frame it, as if that's no big deal. Those are two very big kind of ground shifting implications, right? Being able to have real world value held in digital currency that can then be transferred peer-to-peer around the world fairly quickly with no red tape, no ridiculous fees, is massive. And then on the other side, being able to create these artificially scarce digital assets, non-fungible tokens, and assign anything in the digital world to those assets and then sell them using that same blockchain currency peer-to-peer transaction is quite enormous. So it's kind of interesting how he's writing it off as if these are just two very small things. Some people have suggested that NFTs could be used for recording things like deeds and property titles, but it makes little sense to use blockchains for recording anything physical or anything that requires off-chain validation. It's a pretty huge leap. Authorization, authentication, or confirmation, even if we consider the use of oracles. So he knows what he's talking about. Blockchains only make sense in a digital-only world, and only for transactional data. And so far, nobody came up with a compelling dApp, which is a decentralized application, that is not tied to cryptocurrency in any way. All right, so this is odd, right? He seems to have an issue with the idea that the blockchains and that the decentralized applications that are built upon blockchains have to be tied somehow to cryptocurrency. He seems, like they kind of go hand in hand, right? In order to get the effectiveness of that decentralized application, it's usually rooted in the idea that your digital assets on this application are held in a decentralized wallet. And in order to hold your digital asset in a decentralized wallet, it kind of has to be on a cryptocurrency blockchain, right? It's kind of how the blockchain works. They're not like one angle. You can just have a decentralized track on a blockchain with nodes, and then not use the cryptocurrency, because the cryptocurrency is what's kind of giving value to those digital assets. Otherwise, it's just, distributed ledger technology, but not really in a decentralized fashion, right? You can have distributed ledgers on a centralized track, which seems to be what Magic is wanting as a preference. I don't know. But the idea that decentralized applications should not be tied to cryptocurrency is kind of odd and defeats the purpose, I would say. So this is why when some Web3 evangelists talk about how social media is centralized and how blockchains can help, it's BS. Okay, not sure about that. Social media posts are not transactional data. You may have likes that you can give to posts, but the double spending problem is not relevant here because you have an unrestricted and unlimited supply of likes. He's just kind of grasping at straws here. It seems like an odd comparison. We already have decades of old technology like PGP, which can prove the authenticity of a post. Interesting. So even PGP does use cryptography, but that's a whole other rabbit hole we won't go down. We already have distributed peer-to-peer technologies allowing for censorship-proof decentralized storage of data, such as WebTorrent or PeerTube. So I will say that torrents in general, I would say, were kind of a precursor to cryptocurrency, maybe, or even a precursor to decentralized ownership of data in some sense, because they were kind of broken down into pieces, and then everybody who's on the network would assist, with the torrent downloads and things like that. So I would say it was almost like a precursor and very relevant to the conversation, but not, truly decentralized in the sense of ownership of the one asset in your digital wallet, which again kind of requires the cryptocurrency angle. So Unstoppable Domains looks okay on paper. So Unstoppable Domains is a pretty cool, basically decentralized domains platform. So you can go to unstoppabledomains.com to check it out. They've got .crypto, .nft, .bitcoin, .dao, .coin, a lot of really cool crypto URLs. And then when you purchase them, they actually mint them onto the blockchain for you, and you own it forever. No renewal fees ever, they say. So Unstoppable Domains is super cool, but we'll read his criticism here. It's a for-profit solution that isn't really as decentralized as it pretends to be. You still have to go through UD to purchase domains. Moreover, getting around a DNS block is quite trivial, and Unstoppable Domains won't solve the problem of a hard IP block if your IPS by your IPS if used as a DNS provider. So he's saying that if your internet service provider really wants to block you and block your DNS, block your website, the actual website would still be able to be blocked, even though you would still own the actual URL on the blockchain. So his criticism is kind of odd. I think he's poking fun at the name Unstoppable Domains, as if, no centralized power could ever stop your website if you get your domain here. I don't think that is the promise of Unstoppable Domains. They are unstoppable in the sense of you get to purchase them once and not have to renew them, which is amazing and way better than the other capitalist typical domain sellers that make you renew. Frankly, even Ethereum name service, which is a Web3 URL service as well, does make you renew. So kudos to Unstoppable Domains for making your domain unstoppable and making it so that you keep it forever. So I think it's really cool. Of course, there's still ways for the government to shut down your site when it comes to the actual website being viewable, but that is really beside the point. Projects like the Interplanetary File System, IPFS, are interesting and were already used to fight against censorship. However, the pricing model is slightly obfuscated. The cost of pinning permanent storage is a few times higher compared to regular storage solutions. I think that's understandable. So the interplanetary file system is basically the solution, or supposed to be kind of a solution to the Amazon Web Services, and the idea that your file storage, or maybe not even Amazon Web Services, but basically other file storage services like Google or Dropbox, things like that, sharing your files on the main server, as opposed to this distributed web server, which is basically like a peer-to-peer protocol that's supposed to essentially make sure that your data doesn't get lost, and it's much more accessible. It is expensive. And whether or not it's worth it, many people would argue it is. IPFS is supposed to be much more guaranteed and long-term, more decentralized. So a lot of people do go towards it, but I do kind of agree with some of the cost prohibits. It is a bit prohibitive. Unstoppable. The Interplanetary File System, IPFS. Do look into it. It's pretty cool, good technology, but I think they've got a little ways to go before it can be the more standard use. Now, if you're using a company like Pinata to host and pin your content and guarantee its permanence while you pay a monthly fee, you should start asking yourself how much decentralization you are really left with if you still rely on your hosting provider and on the caching policy of independent nodes. Moreover, we already have magnet links, Tor Onion services, and platforms like Freenet, which is nearly 22 years old. So there have been other file storage services that have been trying to kind of make things a little more free, make things a little bit more out of the grasp of the kind of big companies and the more centralized power brokers to hold your storage and hold your files. So I think it's an interesting angle, but I don't know that it necessarily pokes a hole in Web3 at all. I think IPFS is just the preferred file storage system for a lot of blockchains and NFTs because it does seem to have more of that permanence. But it is a little costly, but a lot of NFT art is also not very big. So it's a nice option. It's not necessarily tangled up in Web3 inextricably. The technology is already here. We've had similar technologies for decades, and the new technology is not what we need to fight the enormous power of the biggest platforms. So this is where he gets into kind of the philosophy and poking holes at the idea that essentially a lot of the Web3 mentality ethos and a lot of the kind of more positive angles that you hear coming out of the Web3 space are basically just venture capitalist talking points, which is an interesting perspective, because I do think there's no denying venture capitalists have a lot of influence in the Web3 space, unfortunately. And, maybe I'll say for better or worse, because you do need investments. It is good to have support. And I'm sure there are some venture capitalists out there who are genuinely in it for the right reasons and genuinely want to see blockchain technology move in the best direction possible. But venture capitalists, by their name and by virtue of being such proud capitalists, also genuinely have to focus on profit margin, because that's kind of their job, right? So he says venture capitalists are having a blast. They can suddenly pretend they are radicals who intend to disrupt centralized intermediaries and create an internet that is owned by its builders, users, or creators. They can pretend that they are the voice of a rebellious generation trying to take on the big guys. However, I'm not really presenting breaking news by pointing out that the only reason VCs invest in Web3 projects is to make profit. As I just said, saying it's the only reason, it's kind of reading their mind, but it is a probably pretty fair assumption. Yeah. A lot of the Web3 projects are only branded as decentralized, with a lot of them using permission or hybrid blockchains. That's definitely the case, where only the company can add or remove tokens, but then the ownership of tokens can be traded independently. As some other writers pointed out, centralization is inevitable under capitalism. Getting a little ideological here. And you can't have real decentralization without a fair and just distribution of power. I would argue that a fair and just distribution of power is pretty much impossible to implement unilaterally. So a fair and just distribution of power can only come about by everybody actually having access to that power, and then as many people as possible actually taking advantage of that access to the power, you know? So it's kind of a weird thing to just say we can't have real decentralization without a fair and just distribution of power. I agree. But to say that, you know, because capitalism is at work in Web3, thereby a fair and just distribution of power is impossible, it's an interesting argument. Cryptocurrency in Web3 does not achieve that. What you get instead is a marketization of power. And we can see where this gets us by looking, for instance, at Bitcoin's completely unsurprising distribution of wealth. Yeah, there's something to be said about the current distribution of wealth of Bitcoin, most definitely. And I think that there's, you know, something also to be said, though, about the potential for people who aren't at that, you know, top percentile. Well, some of them were able to get in early and got themselves into that top percentile and were not wealthy people prior to getting involved in Bitcoin. So that's one key point that is easily missed, you know, because it's been now, 10, 15 years or so. So you don't really think about those early adopters and really give them the credit they deserve for being true holders, or hodlers, as we like to say, holding on for dear life. You know, but the distribution of wealth, there's always going to be a criticism of that. You know, wealthy people who see the advantage in the space have much more capital, obviously, to then invest in the space. I know I just read, I think it was earlier today, Kevin O'Leary saying he's buying the dip of Bitcoin and Ethereum. Not surprising, you know, wealthy billionaires or millionaires who see the value in the technology. I can't blame them for trying to get in. But again, distribution of wealth is much more relevant in a scenario where the people at the top of that distribution, the people who hold the most, can actually hold sway over a specific government, right? Can hold sway. Like, for example, in America, if you have, you know, almost like an oligarchy structure where the corporations are able to spend limitless amounts of money and are able to influence, you know, politicians in a myriad of ways, then that power distribution, that centralized power at the top, matters a lot more because the politicians are listening only to them, you know. But on a decentralized distribution or on a decentralized ledger, it matters a lot less, I would say. And there's times like right now, for example, if you're looking at Ethereum, where I think it's almost $1,000 American for an Ethereum right now, you know, there are times where people can purchase in at fairly low, you know, cost to themselves and look at it as a long-term investment. But even beyond that, it doesn't really matter when you're looking at a peer-to-peer transaction and someone selling their art, you know. It's just not relevant how it's distributed. You know, if somebody like Kofi, an amazing guest that I had on my show early on from Ghana, you know, is able to sell his amazing 3D African masks for whatever cost and get that revenue direct peer-to-peer to himself in Ghana, and then invest in a community college, invest in helping his community, you know, and obviously supporting himself as well. The distribution of the wealth on that blockchain, Ethereum, is completely irrelevant to that transaction, right? So it's that ability to support people through peer-to-peer without the intermediaries, not to mention the continued revenue that Kofi, for example, will continue to get if that mask sells again and again and again. So he'd only get that royalty revenue because of blockchain technology. In the past, artists were not guaranteed that. Even if they were on a platform online that maybe promised to give them that wasn't guaranteed. It was not written into a smart contract that forevermore, when this asset is sold, you're going to get this percentage of it, you know? So it's kind of important to distinguish that, yes, distribution of wealth is relevant. And I do hope, you know, over time that flattens out more and more on the blockchain. I think Ethereum, especially with the creatives and the people that are getting into the space right now, there's a huge potential for all of us to really change our lives in a positive way, and not just, you know, hodling and hoping that it goes to the moon, but actually having transactions and an economy on the blockchain, building that up, and then as the value of that currency goes up, yes, we would benefit from that. But even before, or if that value doesn't ever go up, we're still benefiting from the main peer-to-peer transactions, the main sales that would not be available to us in any other system or any other platform that's currently available, with the profit margins that it allows, with the transparency, accountability that it allows, and not to mention the actual personal connection that you get when purchasing, digital assets directly from the creator. It's just didn't exist anywhere else, So distribution of wealth, it's relevant, but I don't think that it necessarily has a negative impact on Web3 specifically as a technology, as a potential for creators in the space. So, as demonstrated, the technologies supported by the Web3 crowd just aren't new. Again, I beg to differ. The main difference here is that all these projects revolve around DeFi and cryptocurrency. This is the real reason why VCs are so interested in Web3. They want to prolong the crypto bubble. All right. They want to make the projects they have already invested in more relevant and increase the value of any speculative assets associated with them. They want more people to buy crypto, more money to enter the market to inflate the prices. They don't care about decentralization or freedom or censorship. They just want to make big bucks before the bubble finally bursts. This is just silly, but I had to say it, and I apologize for anyone getting triggered out there listening, because I know a lot of our, those of us who understand blockchain technology have been hearing this bubble finally bursts conversation for how many years now? Over a decade, like how many times does the Bitcoin market have to crash and then, skyrocket back up before people will stop calling it a bubble, As I just stated about the peer-to-peer transactions and what's actually possible because of blockchain, that technology is not going anywhere, and it's so clearly better than the previous financial technologies that have been available to creators. So when technology is superior, technology evolves, and the blockchain technology, just that main peer-to-peer transaction, ignoring everything else, ignoring other websites that tried to do similar things, or maybe even did some like the exact same thing, but not on the blockchain. They didn't offer that peer-to-peer transaction. They didn't offer that direct support for creators, in a more decentralized fashion that actually allows the creators to have sovereignty over their assets, Steemit, a blockchain-based blogging and social media website, had to fire 70% of their staff when the price of their cryptocurrency dropped in 2018 during a market crash. These are platforms which have business plans simply built around proprietary cryptocurrency and tokens and their circulation. I'm not too familiar with Steemit. I did a little bit of research before the episode. I think there's a lot of other things that went into why they crashed. And I would also say, if you're going to be doing a Web3 blogging and social media site, talk about the Web3 technology and don't worry about it being necessarily tokenized, right? So you can be taking part in the Web3 space, covering the Web3 space, just like Micah, just like journalist who we had last on our show. And he really focuses on, the interesting kind of philosophical, but also technology-based kind of news that's coming out of the space, and he wants to tell those stories, but it doesn't necessarily have to be on a platform that is fully tokenized, but he's going to incorporate NFTs into his platform as a way for subscribers or real supporters, community members, to support his Bored AF media organization, and those will have probably utility, maybe in the metaverse, maybe when you go to real life events for his media organization, he'll acknowledge the NFT holders who have supported his platform, and again, why not? It doesn't have to be tokenized. There's no possible negative outcome from, for example, a blogging and social media site using an NFT to reward their readers, to acknowledge their community, and then to incentivize other, uses in the future. So it's just a really weird argument, because one blockchain-based blogging and social media company had to fire people when their currency went down. Therefore, Web3 is a scam or BS. Very interesting. What fuels this way of thinking is the ubiquitous technocratic point of view, which, in the shadow of Fukuyama's end of history, he was an economist who believed that liberal democracy and capitalism essentially was the end of history, and that humanity understood that liberal democracy was the way of the future, and thereby history was not repeating itself. So he's a very famous economist. If you're not familiar with him, I believe it's Francis Fukuyama. And yeah, I disagree. I think the world disagreed, as we can see with what some might call a rising tide of fascism, and the idea that liberal democracy is very much on the ropes and not a sure thing at all whatsoever. So let's all fight for it, maybe. And enter blockchain to help support democratic philosophies and views, especially on the decentralized autonomous organization front and what's possible there. So at a time right now when I agree it is not the end of history and the future of liberal democracy is very much up in the air, I would argue that now is a great time for blockchain technology to be embraced. But he's saying he sees the world not as a conflict of different concentrations of power, but simply as a place where bad ideas need to be replaced with better ones. Shiny new technologies devised by smart people will bring about substantial change. I think so. But as I said before, the problem isn't a technological one, it's a political one. If we truly want to confront the power held by the big social media companies, we need to go in the opposite direction to what the Web3 cult is trying to take. Look at the profit motive within the industry. Look at adequate regulation. I'd go as far as saying that the only way to solve the problem with large social media companies is to remove business and profit from the whole equation. All right. So this is where he's clearly showing his socialist side. I'm not even going to bother responding to that because that's just silly. We should look at how certain aspects of decentralization in the context of cryptocurrency provide owners of capital different avenues for abuse and allow them to perform money laundering, wash trading, and general market manipulation. Finally, if we look at onion services, they are predominantly used by black markets. All right. This is the biggest criticism, of course, of specifically cryptocurrency and blockchain. Now, can I sit here and say that there is not money laundering, wash trading, and general market manipulation in crypto, and even specifically in NFTs? I most definitely cannot say that. There are these things. Although I would also say traditional banking has money laundering, wash trading, and general market manipulation, at least between banking or the stock market, right? And we know that happens. So there's always that caveat of, yeah, it's happening in crypto, but it also is happening in the regulatory approved banking industry and stock market industries. So, there's crooks everywhere. And that's kind of beside the point of, again, that peer-to-peer usefulness of the technology, and that's what matters most, more than anything. So a radical standpoint would be to further democratize our monetary system and to look at getting rid of money entirely in the far future. All right. Bitcoin isn't radical. It's a step backwards towards marketization, not democratization, giving more power to the owner of capital, the owners of capital. I mean, we all own some kind of capital, right? But anyway, I always find it hilarious when people suggest that cryptocurrencies are confronting any power. Big banks already invest hundreds of millions of dollars and profit from cryptocurrencies. Crypto might make them feel at most uncomfortable, but not threatened. I would beg to differ. Likewise, Web3, backed by venture capitalists, won't confront any large power. I think it's a fad that will fade away, but even if it gains a foothold, it will only shift power from the big tech to the big VCs, not to the people. Don't get fooled by their marketing campaigns. It's all BS. Thank you, Matchet. I'm going to plug that on medium.com. Just look up Web3 is BS, and you will find his article. I also want to let him know, if he happens to listen, there are definitely people who have copywritten you. From my research, he is the true creator of this article, but I found at least 2, I think 3 other articles claiming to be him by people who were not him. And just in the last 3 to 4 months, literally word for word, ripped this article. So letting you know that. But yeah, I think it's a really cool discussion just for the sake of kind of acknowledging the other side of the coin. One Frog 9 in the building. What's up? So I wanted to highlight that because I really think it's important that we in the Web3 space kind of acknowledge some of the criticisms of Web3 and acknowledge some of the more difficult conversations that need to happen. You know, I think that there's a lot of valid criticism of the venture capitalist narrative, a lot of the cryptocurrency is going to take down the traditional banks. You know, there's a lot of kind of misinformation in that, but at the same time, cryptocurrency and blockchain technology will make you need traditional banks less. And if you know how to actually take advantage of the peer-to-peer technology, they will actually help you avoid a lot of costs that are in traditional banking and support people around the world, send money around the world in a much more safer and streamlined way that is also less costly. So it's awesome. When you're using traditional banks, maybe traditional banks in the West are very, or specifically in Canada where I'm at, are very reputable and reliable, and you're always going to get your money when you go to that bank and you take it out. But I have family in Sierra Leone. I know of places in other corners of the world where sometimes banks, for whatever reason, just won't, you know, withdraw your money for you because they've run over too much or too much inflation or whatever the case may be. So it's really, you know, easy for us to act like banking doesn't need to be replaced or at least improved, but it does. And the blockchain technology is kind of here to allow us to have more ownership of our money, more ownership of our transactions that happen around the world without having to go through these old traditional intermediaries. All right. So even if the banks are investing in cryptocurrencies, which, I mean, they have trade analysts, they know how to look at things that are going to go up. So I don't blame them if they're going to invest in it and make some money on it too. But that's kind of beside the point. You know, traditional banks are definitely scared of crypto. Crypto's already definitely taken some money out of their revenue just by people who have seen the ability to send money to their family and other places in the world without going through Western Union, without going through traditional bank transfers that, again, are kind of oppressive and unrealistically kind of expensive. So with that, it's just, yeah, I'm glad we were able to talk on that. I hope that people were able to gain some value from kind of the technology and pushing back on the whole, you know, political, ideological kind of criticisms of the space, some of which are valid, right? But looking underneath the hood and seeing that, you know, the work that these creators are doing cannot be BS. And so with that, I'm going to bring up our Web3 Warriors site on YouTube, which is our video archives. I feel proud every time I look at it, even though I know my views are not that great. Please go look up Web3 Warriors on YouTube. Hook us up with a subscribe if you can. Check out our range of amazing episodes that we've had featuring all kinds of amazing creators. So each one of these creators is building something that's amazing and impactful in the world, you know, and none of them could ever be called BS. You know, it's just the value that they're getting out of it, the value in many cases that they're bringing back into their communities, and the fact that the people purchasing their NFTs from them are getting what they want. All of them, you know, they're getting the art they want. They're getting the experience that they want when they purchase it. Okay. So there's just no ability for anything wrong to happen, right? Like when I purchase a mask from Kofi and I'm looking at like the potential of that purchase actually supporting, you know, children in Ghana and making sure that they can actually, you know, get more technological education and better computers, there's no possible downside to that, right? And Web3 is filled with stories like this, filled with creators putting their work onto the blockchain, not just to make money, not just to get paid in Ethereum or Tezos or Solana, but to actually make a difference in their community and to actually build out bigger projects that have very ambitious goals. So I think that's the part that's being missed in a lot of the FUD. And that's why I wanted to just really highlight some of the amazing creators we've had on the show here. And I want to throw to One Frog 9 if he does want to join us via audio. Let him know that he can. But I wanted to just highlight specifically a few, hopefully not offending anyone if I don't mention you, but I really just want to look at like the amazing artists and creators that we've had on this platform already. I've spoken to, Kofi's amazing work over and over again. I hope I don't embarrass him because I speak about his work often when I'm talking about how Web3 cannot go wrong, essentially, and how Web3 cannot be BS, because the people, not all, but some people, some creators in this space who are building are benefiting so much from what they're doing, and the people around them are benefiting so much that there's just no possible way that it's, there's any negative to it, And aside from Kofi, we spoke to Liz in Malaysia, who's got the amazing Mad Bull project that's been doing really just amazing work on Ethereum, and she is officially verified by the by OpenSea as well, and she's one of the 2 creators that we've had on Web3 Warriors, who is 2 or 3, I don't even know. Yeah, we got a few verified creators on Web3 Warriors. Got JJ, I think Kofi himself as well. So it's really exciting just looking back and seeing what they're building and what they've done. So yeah, Liz in Malaysia was another really interesting person to speak to, because she had just this seed of an idea, this creativity kind of inspired by the Bored Apes and looking at some of these other animals and PFPs that were coming out. But she wanted to do something in her own way and actually build toys with a long roadmap towards, kind of rewarding her holders with versions and toys that actually have additional utility in the real world, and could possibly be sold, and you could sell them if you own that toy and get revenue out of it. So it was a really cool idea. And at first she was just put it out there, trying to sell a little bit here and there, and I think it was 3 or 4 months in that one of the major collectors in the Web3 space kind of stumbled into her clubhouse room and was really amazed by her work, decided to buy a few, and it just went gangbusters from there. And she was able to basically sell out, and it's been very popular items since then. And that's just an example of one person, just leaning into a creative idea that they've had, leaning into a skill that they already have, and then finding success in Web3 and on the NFTs and on the blockchain. So it's just really inspiring, especially loving the international vibes of the space, Liz in Malaysia, Kofi in Ghana. We have Zion, who joined us from Nigeria, who also has some amazing, amazing creations. And, looking at Nigeria, looking at these corners of the world where even, crypto is actually outlawed, like it's actually banned, and it's still like so many creators out there just trying to make use of it, trying to make use of the NFT space, even in corners of the world where, the government's trying to tell them not to. So why would they do that? Why would they go over and above to actually take advantage of a technology and an economy that they see, It's not just to get paid. It's actually because they see the value in the long-term growth of the space. People wouldn't go out of their way to kind of avoid potential, being caught by the government, having your internet shut down, whatever the case may be, if they didn't see the value and receive value directly from the technology, So it's just another case in point of what's really possible, and the way that it's bringing together the whole international kind of community of creators. This is where I bring it back to gaming all the time, because when I think about my time as, just enjoying certain video games, sporting games, jumping online and playing people on the other side of the planet was normal to me, And so now NFTs have kind of gamified life. They've made this same international aspect, this same ability to connect with people all over the world in a real way in the digital world, have so much more value. It's just taken it to this new space where I can purchase art from someone in the digital world who I met, maybe on Twitter, maybe on Clubhouse. Maybe I just stumbled onto their art on OpenSea or on Solana or on Hic et Nunc for Tezos or Taya or Object.com. I still say Hic et Nunc even though their site's down. But, just stumbling upon art, purchasing the art, helping that artist. Very simple. It can't go wrong. And so, being able to do that and then having them be from wherever they might be from in the world, it's the art that speaks to you first, and then the geographic implications kind of arrive after. And it's like, oh, so I purchased this art and now how's it helping you? And you get to hear from them, how it's helping them too. So it's just really exciting. One thing that I do want to try to do more of in the future is a little bit more range of different types of blockchains. I spoke to Hoops. I think he was the only non-Ethereum creator that we spoke to so far on the show. And he was building his amazing project on Solana, which was also a very interesting kind of case of taking this concept of name and likeness, right? And in America, especially college athletes, up until recently, they actually had no control or no ownership of their own name and likeness. So they could be super popular in college, be doing amazing. They couldn't turn around and get sponsorship deals, turn around and, sell anything to their fans at the college level, because the colleges actually restricted that. I believe that's changed. And as that's changed, Hoops was, I think, the first and still the only one to really see the potential for that change in the NFT space and the blockchain space. And now with his project on the Solana blockchain, he's really trying to tell these athletes, take ownership of your name and likeness and mint it on the blockchain and make some sales. And this will be your initial kind of genesis NFTs. And as you build your career, you can go back and make new NFTs. You make it to the NBA, now you got an NBA NFT. And so just the idea of monetizing in this new way and seeing the potential for this new space was really super exciting. And Hoops has been just an inspiration, and he's also doing a really amazing work with children, helping kids understand the implications of crypto and blockchain technology. So yeah, that was really awesome, and having at least one Solana project on there was cool. But this episode 22 is essentially wrapping up season 1 of Web3 Warriors. And with season 2, we are going to try to have a bit more Tezos creators on here. We'll try to get some more Solana creators on here. So I'm looking forward to interviewing some more people from around different blockchains as well. I do love Ethereum. I believe really strongly in the decentralization and immutability of Ethereum. When I look at some of the other blockchains, I still have faith, especially when I look at Tezos. I really like the kind of artistic community on Tezos, and I think that if they just kept existing only for the art, that would be enough, but as far as the actual nodes, when looking at the blockchain and looking at the decentralized aspect of the nodes and whether or not they are truly, sufficiently decentralized to the span of not being impacted and not having to worry about like a group of VCs, for example, or anyone really being able to take down the blockchain, Ethereum and Bitcoin are definitely the strongest in that regard. So that is a big part of why I've spoken to Ethereum creators, and I've just been, kind of more busy in the Web3 Ethereum space. But I am a proud Tezos collector as well, and I love art on the blockchain anywhere. But yeah, it's going to be cool. We're going to try to look into a little bit more Tezos and Solana art. But yeah, it's just been a really, really amazing ride. And I just want to thank again all of our guests who have joined the show. It's been amazing. So we're going to call in, we got One Frog 9 is going to join us here for a little bit of Web3 conversation. Looking forward to that. And what's up, One Frog 9?
Yo, what's going on, man?
What's up? How's it going?
It's going good, man. Just got out of the Storytime DAO daily, or end of the week. Not really daily. We don't meet on Sundays, but yeah, we had our little Saturday meeting, just kind of tying up some last kind of thoughts about New York and production, and yeah, so it was
Awesome.
a good meeting. I think I wasn't able to stay the whole thing. It was kind of hitting the 2 hour mark, so I was I want to be mindful of my time. I
No
think
doubt.
that's something that's really important about this space is being able to manage your time and I think importantly put yourself first as much as you can because obviously we come into this with real world things already going on, and a lot of this is new and a lot of it's moving fast. So um, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of it all and just want to keep going and going, but um, you see a lot of people get burnt out and fall out. But
Most definitely.
I'm grateful that my life has just kind of already tried to teach me just be patient, just manage my time. So um,
Nice.
Yeah, man. Sorry, I just kind of jumping into
No, that's
that.
great. That's great. That's why I'm glad you're able to join. I just went over this Web3 is BS article. I don't know how much of that you caught, and I'm hoping that I offered some value, especially for those outside of the Web3 space. I know that those of us who are already, fully understanding the power of peer-to-peer, the value of the blockchain as a technology, are probably not wanting to hear some of that I had to read. But I thought for everyone else who is very much critical and still, paying attention to more of the nefarious side of the space, I had to just kind of easily point out, the big gaps in that perception, and the idea that, the technology, like you say, especially when you're patient and you're really just building for the sake of building, and you're not having these high hopes of your NFT is going to go to the moon, or all your NFTs are going to sell out in a day, and all this kind of stuff. And you're really just focused on the tech, and you're focused on your project. What are you building, and what is the problem you're solving, or the entertainment you're providing, if that's what you're doing. So yeah, I hope that people can glean from that and realize the value and ignore the FUD. But how have you thought about
Well,
this
and
whole venture capitalist perception and some of those points that were brought up?
I wasn't able to catch those, and I have the article here, but I haven't had a chance to go through it. Could you just touch on those again, real quick?
Cool, yeah. So essentially saying that a lot of the kind of Web3 as this new egalitarian and kind of more fair, decentralized world, and then the philosophy that flows out of that is all kind of VC, venture capitalist, rhetoric to basically help them sell things, and it's not genuine. Now, I push back on that by saying whether or not that's true, as far as venture capitalists using that language as basically PR, the technology remains that, as I've shown on our show with a lot of these creators and the impact that they're making, the peer-to-peer value is undeniable, right? But what do you think about venture capitalists in the space in general?
Cool. Yeah, thanks for that little primer there.
Mm-hmm.
So I, again, I didn't read the article, and was just kind of tuning in, but what I will say is like it's not it's um it's not hard to kind of disagree with some of these counterpoints to what we're calling Web3 and blockchain and NFTs. So, but like just well, sorry, sometimes my words getting all twisted up, but
Oh, good.
I always feel like these problems end up being a reflection of a system that we're already stuck inside of, being that the fiat currency, the colonial system, to just call it in short. And that, yeah, those players are in this space too. But to your point, the difference is the technology it's just a completely different arrangement consciously. Is that and it allows us, what I mean is it allows us to engage each other's work at that peer-to-peer level, meaning there's no one in between that's going to limit how we can do business. So obviously right now, and some of the history of blockchain has been pretty shady, in regards to how Bitcoin has been used. I remember hearing about that back in 2012, but I I believe so strongly in the impact and the potential impact, and as you've demonstrated here, the people who've already dug deep into it, um, to bring their mark, and it goes beyond just the greed of profit, but into exploring how this technology can really benefit humanity. So,
Oh,
um,
Steph.
I came into the space with my concerns about the environment, really, because just hearing about the power consumption, but I see more and more, but I believe it from the beginning too. Is like technology constantly is evolving, and whenever there's something that doesn't work to the way the people want it to work, then those of us that know how to at least shape those tools. I'm not a coder or programmer, but I know that there's coders and programmers out there that care more about the impact of the product, or that they're building, the software that they're making. I mean, you hear a lot of the programs on GitHub are holding up like entire corporations
Right,
basically, or part,
exactly. Yeah.
you know, and and like they can't even, some of them probably can't even get the lead programmers, whoever designed it, to even work on it because of what it is. So I don't know. I have too many sources for that, but my point is that I believe, I have hope for humanity and our ability to kind of pull ourselves back to reality through technology, through the so-called metaverse. And I do believe the Web3 is more of a marketing thing, but it's a tool, and it's a reference to, again, the technology, because we're still going to be using Web2, HTTP, or these are protocols, right? These are we can find white papers for those, TCP, IP, and UDP. Like, these are ways that a photo gets sent through Texas or Michigan in order to get to California or the East Coast. So
Right.
we're Web3 is again a reference to this, the how this technology is being shaped. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's interesting because I kind of agree, but I've definitely was partial to Web3 early on when I first heard the phrase, mainly because I like the idea that internet is evolving and this next phase of internet has to incorporate blockchain. I really like that concept because I think there are people, a lot of powerful entities that would actually prefer that the blockchain ethos not be part of Web3. And I think when that
Right.
phrase, when the phrase was kind of first popping up, there was some push from certain corners, one company not to be named, but that really was pushing to make Web3 viewed as essentially the metaverse, essentially the idea that, going into the digital space and working in there was Web3. And that's not Web3. That's just a video game, right? And I think that there was a lot of, I saw it, and that's actually why I started the podcast. And it's interesting, the day that I locked down Web3 Warriors, and then made it public on Clubhouse in a club that I have yet to use, which we'll definitely be using in season 2. But when I first locked it down, like the day I locked down Web3 Warriors, like 4 other Web3 Warrior accounts popped up, not surprisingly. And I think it resonated a lot with people because once Web3 was defined as blockchain based internet, I think it helped push things forward. I think there was an attempt, for example, Meta was looking at their space, and still talking about, I think their most recent announcement was that they're going to give creators 50% of revenue from their assets that they build, which, compared to YouTube or maybe some other video games sounds like a lot, but compared to crypto voxels or Decentraland is, 45% less than what you would get, selling your digital assets there on an actual wallet that you actually own yourself, not some meta wallet that is probably not decentralized or owned by your own self as an individual. So all that to say, it is some marketing for sure, the Web3 phrase, but I do think that it helped us lock down the concept of internet must evolve into blockchain. What do you think of that?
Yeah, it's the entryway. It's the starting of the conversation, definitely, and it is important to make those, to help people understand the distinctions when you're talking about decentralization, because for sure that has to be that, and all these other key ethos aspects of even why, because as I understood it, NFTs were created as a way to give people truly unique gifts digitally, right? I don't know, is that, kinda what you've heard? I haven't had a chance to deep dive too much on that, but,
Yeah, in
um,
the sense of,
be
truly unique, as far like what the article called it, artificially scarce, which is maybe accurate, but yeah,
mm,
essentially the idea that you are, signing it digitally and that only you could sign it. I think that's the biggest thing, is
mhm,
having that kind of certificate of authenticity digitally created by the actual creator of that artwork and then minting it on the blockchain. So not just necessarily unique, but actually personalized and, having the creator's touch forever.
right.
Mm.
'Cause, yeah, I've what's been clear to me, as I've been really mainly just from Clubhouse, and then from Clubhouse, I've been connecting people through Twitter, and Instagram. I just don't use Instagram that much, but, um, it's my thought with all this is that we're the ones defining the culture of that, and trying to carry the torch for what this can be and should be. Um, at the same time, the Cokes and the Pepsis and the Ubisofts are all going to be there too, trying to make it their own. But it's like those of us that have been able to at least see some glimpse of the truth of what this can be. It's like we gotta hold that, because I remember when I was first getting, like, again, when I started using Clubhouse about a year ago, and probably about into the fall, there's some groups I'd be around that time. I remember, this guy wanted to build a metaverse. This is before they even talked about Meta, but it was like wanted to build this metaverse. But like, if you just had like a cheap token, then you lived in a tent, or some kind of like,
Right.
it's like he just totally wanted to replicate like the whole bullshit. Like, it didn't make any, like, it's like, so we could make anything. We could literally make anything with our imagination, and we're just gonna try to lock people into the bullshit again. Like, come on. And
Yeah, but
so I'm just like, uh, but so it's like, to those people, we have to just be the examples and demonstrate how this is. So and I've been a part of groups like the Dream Conduit, hang out with you, Web3 Warriors, here with the Storytime DAO, the Blockchain Gospel, Kane's rooms, like all, we did. So Storytime did the step and repeat thing. We got all these logos, like all these communities have come, and we never would have been able to connect if it weren't at least for the internet and things like Clubhouse, where we can all they do come together and learn and share stories. And so it's like, okay, we could already do that with the internet, and but it's just now like we're saying, this whole new a- um just relationship with the digital and the physical world is just getting even more. The bridge there is getting even stronger through things like blockchain and AR and VR. So, at the end of the day, I'll just say I just fully believe blockchain is going to touch every single industry. It doesn't have to touch everybody, or you don't have to be involved, but I think at least just taking the time to understand what it is really, and how it's going to function, and I think, yeah,
Yeah, no,
I'm
I'm
done
with you,
speaking.
man. Well, I mean, we're all with you. That's why I say I speak to the choir. That's why I had to give a little bit of a trigger warning before I read that article, because I know, my main audience is the Web3 diehards like us, But I am trying to offer that educational aspect, that value for people who hopefully, in the future, as this bear market turns into a bull market again, and people are looking back, oh, what is this Web3 we're hearing about? What is all this crazy crypto that's going back up and blah blah blah? My hope is at that point, when they go searching and they find Web3 Warriors and maybe they stumble upon this, addressing the FUD, and they can actually listen to me kind of point by point, kind of try to dismantle some of that fear, uncertainty, and doubt, some of the politicization, and kind of really just getting ideological about it. I enjoy those conversations because I can say, oh, well, blockchain is capitalist without thinking it's taking all of the horrible, greed and kind of uglier side of real world capitalism into the blockchain. I just think, when I think of the idea that it is, free markets, there's no denying that. And that was one of this article's criticisms too, right? It was the idea that, oh, it's not the decentralization or freedom, it's just the marketization of power, and I mean, marketization of power is kind of a weird thing to criticize, because markets are the markets and power is power. And I think, unfortunately, those who are gaining, the most wealth within any given market are going to have a bit of power. But I made the argument that this whole, distribution of wealth, and the idea that, oh, the 1% or 2% have most of the Bitcoin and all this, it matters a lot less on the blockchain, right? Because on the blockchain, you don't actually have like the political implications of that ownership, right? Like in the real world, in America, the 1% running everything and telling the politicians what to do has all kinds of like really negative implications on the other people who, live normal lives and need, to have healthcare and all that kind of stuff, good education. So when their needs are being ignored for the sake of the 1% at the top, that's where that imbalance becomes a serious issue. Now you take that imbalance on the blockchain and you say, okay, it is not ideal that, if you hold, I think it's four Bitcoins, you're in the top 2% or 1% of Bitcoin. That's maybe not ideal, but it doesn't actually impact negatively those of us who are at the way bottom end using Bitcoin to make peer-to-peer transactions, right? Using Bitcoin to send money to our family in West Africa and avoid Western Union and only pay, $4 in Bitcoin fees, and they get it instantly. Now, the off-ramping on their side is still a little bit nuanced. In some cases it might not be super easy, but at the same time, having that asset means you could actually go purchase something just with Bitcoin as soon as you have it, or you more than likely will find a way to off-ramp it in your local jurisdiction, and it would still be a lot cheaper than going through Western Union. So yeah, there's a lot of this kind of ideological argument that comes up, and I think it's just people are stuck in their ways, and so they hear capitalism or they hear free markets, and they start assigning all of the negative things in the real world to the blockchain. But in the sense of free markets being truly free, because let's be honest, the capitalist so-called free market in the real world have not been truly that free, and there are certain segments of the population, certain demographics that get roadblocks put in front of them, whether intentionally or even unintentionally, by other people that they have to rely on to either get their money from the bank or to get pay from a boss, or, to get money for their artwork from a symposium or gallery that's only going to give them a fraction of the percentage and is not going to tell them who their actual buyer was, so these kind of middlemen are being removed by blockchain. And it's not if they'll be removed or when they'll be, like, they're being removed actively right now. We see it happening and we see people benefiting from it. So to criticize that because it's marketization seems like, counterintuitive. What do you think?
Yeah. Man, marketization. I'm not an economist, and math just makes my head spin after a while. But so I don't think I could really speak too much on how those impacts are going to be. But for me, my instinct generally is just that, like, yeah, this is going to be a reflection of all the bad in humanity too, and this isn't going to be able to escape things that we already have set up, and that I think as but again, we're trying to shape a culture and make something that's long lasting, and that will have an effect on mainstream culture through this technology. And I think as we continue to do that and make our splashes as artists and builders and creators, and I think within the next 2 to 5 years, a lot of these tools are going to be more accessible, and seed phrases will be a little more common. And I know there's some kind of murmurs about MetaMask and it being decentralized enough or not, or whatever.
Yeah.
So maybe there'll be the next something, and then me and you were using Discord. I've been using Discord for years, right?
Yeah.
But people are using Vine for a while too, and Vine's gone. So
Right.
it's there's always something on the horizon, and this place is changing so fast. And I think Lowe might have spoke to this at some point, but I think it's going to be the nations that aren't really at the quote apex of the economy, whether it's like the US or but actually Germany, I think, is pretty crypto friendly.
Well,
But
even
I'm thinking of
Canada,
other
I like to
places.
think we're pretty ahead of the curve, honestly. Canada's pretty like acknowledging, like, we have some pretty decent regulations, I would say, as far as like not being too hands-on and too heavy with regulation, but acknowledging the value, and basically taxing people at the point of taking their money off the blockchain and into, fiat, but essentially leaving them alone otherwise, which is amazing.
Yeah. So I again, all I can, we're kind of choir city over here.
No, but it's
So
good though, because I know that you've raised some questions around, you do a lot of work in the social activist space, and the much needed abolition movement, right, and the crazy situation with private jails in America. So, and in those circles, right, I think you've run into quite a few people who are not fans of blockchain, right? And I think it does kind of come back to a little bit of that anti-capitalist and this kind of ideological idea that, blockchain's just for right-wing libertarians or whatever the case may be. Have you, I know you've come across it a bit. How do you kind of push back on that, or do you bother trying, or you just, what do you think?
I mean, honestly, I've just kind of been more isolated. I mean, even with the internet, I think most people who are kind of really deep in those circles are doing some fantastic work. And as far as like the U.S., yeah, slavery is still legal in the U.S. through not only the 13th Amendment, which is a federal, that's a blanket law or whatever, and across all 50 states, but even throughout the 50 states, without about 20 or so, 25 have similar, we'll call it pro-slavery legislation. And so
Crazy.
in their state constitutions, and at this time right now, we have about half a dozen states looking at getting not only removing the pro-slavery language, but putting in anti-slavery language into their constitution, so that they're going to be
There you
voting
go.
on statewide this year. And so that's super cool. And so I haven't really had the chance to get in with some groups who are really working on that stuff, but I think at least I've kind of gotten some of them maybe a little more active on Twitter, which isn't huge, obviously, but I think those little steps like that can bring, and really they're already been at the UN. They already have a lot of legislative kind of backing and
Mm.
stuff, even at the federal level. So
And that is the
um,
most important,
it, it
getting some stuff on the blockchain
yeah,
is cool too, but definitely, push comes to shove. You need those policymakers listening to you.
what I think honestly for some real like strong touch points or connections or any if like even if they were even interested in any kind of onboarding, that would just have to be like that would have to be really presented in a way that is formal and catches their attention like organization wide. Maybe I don't know
Actually, you know
because
what, one frog nine,
I
this
I,
just
I think well because here's what I was gonna say. Because as I was trying to talk to some of the Max and Yusuf, they're so busy doing their Sunday show, and they barely have time for that. I think throughout the week. So, but when I was kind of trying to get them at least on Clubhouse and stuff, I was listening to their show, and they're like, if they need help, they need like California needs $30 million, and like Texas needs like 50 million. Just
mm,
to kind of get their campaigns out the door. So it's like obviously if I could it'd be cool if I could just figure that out like for myself, so I don't feel like I could even like help them on that front, but I see the power of the communities that we have in Clubhouse,
yeah.
and I don't think stuff like that's impossible,
No, it's
but
definitely not impossible, and you just sparked my brain. You made me think of something, and I'm just going to go ahead and share it live on the
yeah,
podcast for the world to steal. But essentially, Web3 for social activism, and not just saying it, but actually creating a essentially like a pitch deck or a basic kind of 1, 2, 3 of why Web3 will help your social activist group, B, how Web3 could help your social activist group. Example, either a PFP collection or even just specifically leaning on artists within your organization, which I'm sure these activists do have some awesome artists already within their spaces,
right,
and minting that art for the sake of supporting the abolition movement. And then, for example, it could be any other social activist group as well, for the sake of supporting your movement, and then, putting it out there as an opportunity for people to support you this way. Now, most of your activists probably aren't on the blockchain yet. But there are a lot of activists who are on the blockchain. So you start by targeting them, but you also give this as an opportunity to onboard people into it. So yeah, Web3 for social activism right there. Someone steal that, put it out there. I'm sure we'll see it soon.
yeah, I mean there's plenty of potential, and also you've referenced this, and this kind of what we're working towards here where I'm at here in North Carolina, but just getting together with people in our local areas, and if we're not already doing some brunch or lunch or breakfast or dinner or something,
Yeah.
events where people can come together, socialize safely, and do a little bit of onboarding and sharing stories like like the first NFT project I bought into was the Dastardly Ducks, and they basically it was just kind of a Hail Mary launch to raise some money to save their farm, the little farm they live on in Georgia in the South.
Mm.
And there's a lesbian couple that's just like trying to figure it out, and they were really like on the week of the same week they were going to basically have a hearing, and like they launched their Dastardly Ducks. It was I think 5,000 ducks, and they were about 0.005. So at the time it was around probably $15, and and I lucked out. Gas is like $15 as well, so it was around 30. I got two of them. That was my first NFT after being in the space for so long, and they raised I forget the ETH amount, but and it was like just before there was a dip too, so they lucked out and actually got it all converted and were able to
Nice.
pay off their farm bill.
Yeah, I actually just brought them
And
up on the screen here. It looks like they did a total of 9.7 Ethereum. That's beautiful. So at the time, that was
yeah,
probably
and
over 10, 15 grand.
that was 120 grand. That was
What?
120 grand is what they got
Wow.
out of that. And then the market dipped like the next week, and that was in January. So that was like so that's 120 grand, and then from that they connected with Iron Chef Kat Cora, who is the first female Iron Chef in the
Wow.
US or just in general, I guess. And she's a celebrity and stuff like that. So they did a Yo Kitties collection, another PFP thing. So it's like these are people, this is just a couple. The one does the art and one does the code. And yeah, these are very specialized skills, but and it's not all roses either, right? I'm part of their community, and we see how they still struggle.
Yeah.
And so oh man, but I just it's just amazing just to see that story and to see just to be able to connect with other creators and just it's like we're building this global family, man.
Exactly. That's what it's all about, man. Really, it's just, yeah. So I hope I've been able to kind of shine a light on the real tech. In our last episode with Micah, it was, I quoted this line that I heard somewhere in Clubhouse, riffing off of the old 90s political line. It's the economy, stupid, but instead it's the technology, stupid. It's the peer-to-peer, stupid. Because really, nobody can tell me that the peer-to-peer power of blockchain technology, and more specifically the ability for artists and creators, both in the digital world but even real world artists, like we've had Violetta and JJ Weinberg, Violetta Melnikova. They both were very established artists in the traditional space, making amazing works of art, who jumped into NFTs and have been selling their pieces at way different levels of Ethereum, and now getting into some PFP collections. And it's just an example of somebody taking their art and jumping into the blockchain, making it there, and then growing a new career, growing a new profession, and taking their time as well. Going back to what you said, Frog, patience is everything in this space. And I think the ones who, want to get that quick success, I can't blame them for it. Everybody wants quick success. I want quick success here with Web3 Warriors, but I don't have the budget for marketing to make that like massive, so I'm cool with taking my time. And I think a lot of builders in this space need to take that lesson for sure. Patience is a huge virtue, and it's super valuable in this space because as we've seen, just looking back at the people that have been in Ethereum for 4 years now, they're pretty much all doing pretty well for themselves, right? Unless they sold at a really dumb time. But in general, those who have been around and stayed in the space for the last 4 years, they're pretty much all doing pretty okay at this point, right? So going forward, as we build and as we, put more and more NFTs onto the blockchain, as we build out in the metaverse, as we do stuff like this amazing project that I've had up on the screen for a bit now with Storytime DAO that Frog and myself are proud members of, where we're basically bringing, literature and storytelling and kind of harnessing creative power in a collaborative way into this DAO as a community. And then we're going to be putting brand new projects and stories onto the blockchain and supporting project teams to get their projects through the door through Storytime DAO. And we're already seeing amazing creative energy coming through. And this week, we're going to be live in New York City. You can tune in through Clubhouse or through Twitch at Storytime DAO, and we'll be live streaming a little bit. I think it's from 3 p.m. Eastern to 5 p.m. Eastern, Monday to at least Thursday. And that's going to be really exciting. So we're going to actually be showing what's happening at NFT NYC live on Twitch and through Clubhouse. That's going to be also streaming into our Voxel spot, which is actually Low Sleazy's Voxel spot. And so that's going to be really exciting. A little dance party in the metaverse and a little bit of interviews with people on the streets in NYC. So do join us there at Storytime DAO, either on Twitch or on Clubhouse. You can also search Storytime DAO in Crypto Voxels and find our Voxel space there. And if you're watching on the live stream, you can actually scan the QR code that you see on the screen right now. It should bring you to our voxel spot. But yeah, really cool conversation, Frog. Did you have anything else you want to add? I also want to just say, anyone watching, thank you for watching us. If you have any questions, please do ask your questions now. We're going to be winding down fairly soon. But, we've touched on a lot of, I think, really relevant, important kind of FUD and the points that counter that FUD, and then really just kind of emphasizing for people that nobody can tell me that this technology is not impactful in a positive way, and for those who are trying to be naysayers about Web3, just understand there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of building, going on. The blockchain is still, especially Ethereum, is still relatively in its early days. They're trying to lower costs. They're trying to streamline some functionality. So a lot of things are still being ironed out. So when you look at the markets right now, this is a natural dip. It's going to be a natural bear market. And for those of us who have been in this space, this is sale time. This is the time to build. This is the time to get a good deal on maybe some metaverse space, maybe some digital assets, and really just learn, put your head down and figure out what's happening in the space and how can I plug in? Because literally everybody can plug in. Everybody has some creative, something to contribute to the space. And at the very least, you'll probably find some art that you love and maybe want to collect. So I highly recommend it. Anyone kind of just wanting to know about Web3, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter at Web3 Warriors. Feel free to email us, web3warriors@gmail.com. We continue to build here, and we're happy to help anybody with onboarding, as well as look at Storytime DAO, go on Clubhouse, follow Dream Conduit, follow Blockchain Gospel, follow Neighborhood Jewelry. These are all great onboarding tools that will help people kind of jump into the space in kind of fun and exciting ways, not just dry, technocratic language, and not necessarily as boring as, getting into the weeds of the politics of it all. But some of us love that stuff. So Frog, what are you thinking before we wrap up here? As far as, next steps, I know you're looking forward to this live stream from NYC. It's going to be amazing for Storytime DAO. But you yourself, I think you've got your Web3 Appalachia, which is a really cool group. Where do you see that going, and what are you kind of building in the Web3 space right now?
For sure. Web3 Appalachia, we are, again, just a couple folks here in North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, and wanting to just, again, bring this conversation to the real world. And we're going to be having our first little get together coming up in the next couple weeks, and not something huge, just some of the folks that have been showing up to our weekly clubhouse rooms. It is, again, Web3 Appalachia. We're on there at 7 Eastern every Thursday. It's 7 at night.
Nice.
And usually we go about an hour or two. And um, it's just another onboarding space, free onboarding. Come get some free onboarding, or if you have questions about the space. And it's also a stage where our local group is building in public, basically going through just all the nitty gritty, and it's just all up there basically. So like last
Yeah.
week, I didn't really have the report really prepared for this topic, which was a quadratic funding. It was something that I had found, and I was really like, I didn't understand it, but I was like, "Hey, this will be a good topic idea." So I think we had some success just because of the questions, like, "What is quadratic funding?" That was the
Yeah,
title,
definitely pulled me into. I was like, quadratic funding. That sounds interesting.
and people would want to reset, and I'm like, "I'm literally asking you, what is quadratic funding?" Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
but it actually forced me to figure it out. And quadratic funding, real quick, is just it's more of if you're managing a pool of money for a public good specifically. I believe is what this formula. It's a math formula
Mhm.
that will take the pool and say, if we have the pool of money, and say if we have a number of projects that are for the public good, so it means like there's no one's going to argue about what it is, and it's not competing with anything else. It's like not it meets that kind of criteria, and we have a number of projects that are in that, and then now we have this pool of money. We can It's a way to match funds to projects that have more contributors, more backers. So
That's interesting. It's almost like
Anyway,
a crowdfunding kind of thing, but more limited and
yes,
very precise, I guess, right?
it's a crowdfunding tool. Yeah, and is it the best one? I don't know, but that's just what we talked about last week. Next week we're going to talk about somebody wanted to do a little more of an onboarding thing, so we're going to kind of get back to that. Lately we've been just kind of it's really just been the 3 or 4 of us, and that's fine. I mean, we don't need to have a huge thing, but
Well,
we're
that's
just
just
trying to do
how it
that
starts.
organic.
You got that core group.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
inspired by you actually around the same time that you started Web3 Appalachia. Sorry, I've heard Appalachia
No, go
somewhere,
for
but
it.
Appalachia.
Yeah,
When you started that, I was looking at Web3 Winnipeg here in my local area, and I locked down Web3Winnipeg.eth, and we have some really
nice.
cool kind of ideas of building out, like you said, basically doing a real life room conversations and helping people onboard, answering questions, just like you are with your clubhouse rooms, but also doing it in real life like you are as well in Appalachia.
Nice.
So yeah, it's
Excellent.
really exciting. But I think that getting very few people at first is something you just have to be okay with. Going
Oh,
back to
yeah.
my main point when I started this podcast, or like this episode specifically, really just talking about like in my efforts to pull gamers into Web3, they have failed miserably. like literally nobody is interested, and it's like a little bit disheartening, but at the same time kind of encouraging in the sense of like when I talk to people like you and obviously all of our amazing guests that we've had on the show, it's encouraging how confident we are in the technology and how much we see the value in it. So I'm going to keep pushing, but I do like things like what I did at the start of this show, dismantling or trying to dismantle some of this FUD and some of the more political arguments against blockchain. I do that for those people who want to learn and who maybe are being dissuaded by some of the misinformation out there. So hopefully it helps, and we're going to keep plugging away at it. We're going to keep building here at the Web3 Warriors. It's always a good time. So yeah, just on the topic of, persuading people to get into Web3, what do you tell people if you are trying at all? Would you consider yourself an evangelist or?
I, I did have a chance to talk to some people at a gathering a couple weeks ago. It's really just I got to get them through what is blockchain. I feel like in order to even get to kind of that, and sometimes that I try to say it in as few words as possible, but it
Yeah.
ends up getting kind of out there. But I think always just starting with where people are at. I mean, usually I'm just like, hey, do you use the internet at all? Like, cause I had to take an Uber a couple months ago back and forth. And one guy, the guy taking me to where I was going, he was receptive and, used the internet. So that's check one. And again, I'm in the South too. So
Right.
it's like hit or miss really. But, and so he was receptive to the ideas of decentralization and things like that, and the other guy, he didn't even really use computers or the internet, that kind of puts it dead in the water for me. But doesn't mean that there's not at least some, who knows if they'll listen at that point. But you could
Yeah.
just say, well, here's what it is. But
Yeah.
I was gonna say, actually, you're talking about gamers. I think for sure the Web3 or NFT narrative around gamers is largely um, held together, I think, by the big kind of the exec at the executive level, because my feeling is it's such a pain in the ass to cross over from one tech to the other, and they're already doing that with engines and stuff like that, and then to get something. So I think at the executive level, that's terrifying a lot of people that don't
Yeah.
want to take that time to get onboarded, or they feel like they. And again, we're coming from a space where that's not something you even really want to be charging people for, right? Just to get them in. So anyway, the thing with the gamers is that, and the Kotaku, some of those other social media things. But here's what it's a shame I didn't get to you think to get this to you earlier. But Dr. Disrespect, his Midnight Society developer thing, they're doing a New York meetup on the
Oh,
22nd. You can RSVP. I'll put this link here in
yeah.
our DMs
I'd
right
love to
now.
check that out.
Um, but I think maybe you would have better gamer luck going to his Discord, because they're pretty active over there. And you might be able to get some volunteers who, again, you'll still be preaching to the choir, but might be get some good perspectives as well.
Preaching to the
Because
choir with
again,
Dr. Disrespect, like he has an NFT already or what?
no, 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 at least to his community,
Yeah.
because because again, to recap real quick, his project. And I'm not shilling this, what I will say is it's going to be $50 to buy a PFP on Polygon,
Oh, okay.
and
So he's making one.
he made a PFP that you can. I think that his whole game, actually, if you own a Founders Pass PFP, there's going to be like 10,000 given away, or not given away, but sold.
Hmm.
And if you have one, you'll be able to get access to the alpha build of the game they're building, and then they're gonna, I think, do some voting. Because if you're Founders Pass, you get voting rights and all these things. So I think that's a really interesting example of somebody at least trying to hit the space.
That's super interesting. I hadn't heard that one yet. That's
Yeah.
cool. No, I'm definitely gonna look into that. Interesting. $50 founder pass
I gotta
is
go,
reasonable.
dude. I'm just gonna say I was gonna go, but thank you for your time, man, and kick ass with Web3 Warriors.
I
think you got a
appreciate
solid
you.
setup, man. And
I appreciate you, man.
keep at it. Consistency is key, and last year I was streaming a lot on a schedule, and that's great. It's important, and I want to get back to that. But I've been able to get back to that through Clubhouse with our weekly things, and I mean, that's one of the biggest things is that consistency, because even though all these couple weeks it's just like maybe 3 or 4 of us, which is fine,
Mm-hmm.
we're laying a platform in time and space, right? For people to just know that you or we are always going to be there. So
For sure,
but
for sure.
kick ass,
And we
man.
keep building out every week. On that point about consistency, next Saturday is going to be our first Saturday that we do not have an episode, as I'm going to be in transit. I'm going to be in transit getting back from New York. But I am hoping to have some New York live hits for Web3 Warriors as well while I'm out there. So we'll have at least 1 or 2 interviews while we're out there, and that'll make it onto the podcast as well. But yes, thanks, Frog. I appreciate you. If you got to go, no problem. Thank you for your input. Very cool perception. Yeah. And yeah, we'll reconnect again. And I love what you're doing in the space, man.
Absolutely, man. Adios.
All right, take care. Awesome. Love the conversations, tapping in with the community. Much love. This has actually turned out to be a much longer episode than I thought. I thought I'd keep it relatively brief, but it's fitting. It's episode 22, the finale of season 1 of Web3 Warriors. As I said, we're going to be live in New York this week for NFT NYC, hoping to get some decent content out there, both with Storytime DAO and also on the Web3 Warriors Twitch account. So keep an eye out for that. With that, I also want to thank our sponsor, Iskra, the Web3 gaming platform, where they know that gamers deserve compensation for the value that we create as a community, and both gamers and developers are rewarded for taking part in a next gen Web3 gaming experience that is both enjoyable and sustainable. So make sure you visit Iskra at pioneer.iskra.world to join their Discord and get early access to their amazing Web3 gaming platform. They got a few games already showing out there and cool new Pioneer NFTs available for purchase to take early advantage of their amazing ecosystem. So check it out, pioneer.iskra.world. Thank you. And also just want to thank anybody watching. Much love. I really appreciate all of the listens and views that we get on all the different platforms. I'm looking forward to getting more creators on the platform and having amazing conversations and discussions with some new creators, and also inviting back maybe some creators that we had on season 1 and being able to see where they're at now and what they're building, and just continuing to build out. So with that, I want to thank everybody who's checking us out. Seeing no questions from the Twitch or the YouTube chats. We will be live, like I said, again, not next Saturday, but the Saturday after, starting season 2 of which will be episode 23. Please do join us then, and stay tuned for a live notification while we're in NYC. I can't promise you when it's going to happen, but it's going to be cool when it does. And we're going to be talking to some really amazing artists and creators that are out there building for the NFT and Web3 space. So with that, I'll see you next time, and I got much love for everyone. Catch you in the metaverse.